Hi, everybody. Welcome back. And I have such a special guest here today with me. And we've been trying to meet for a very long time, and we finally have. His name is Dr. Tony Nader. I've explained to you all about his background, and he has just published a new book called Consciousness is All There Is. So, welcome, Dr. Nader. It's wonderful to be here with you.
Thank you, Lynn. It's a joy to be with you. You have worked in this field of intention and consciousness and all that as a lifetime, and it's a joy finally that we are together.
Wonderful. So, give us some background as to how you got involved in the Transcendental Meditation organization and also your background as a scientist.
I was seeking, like everyone, to understand what we are here about and how to develop our full potential. What happens in our decision-making process, how we find a vocation and how we work, and all the things that we all as teenagers ask ourselves about why we are here, what's going on. And so I searched in different fields. My background, family background, is of many medical doctors. And so naturally, I thought that by studying medicine, I could understand the human being and how to heal and how to be happy. And at the same time, I thought something can be done from the mind level. I was fascinated by that. And somebody told me, as I was just starting university, that there is this simple technique that one closes the eyes and easily practices it morning and evening, and it takes you to your depths of your inner being and develops within you your full potential. And so I got fascinated by that. I had tried many things, yoga, breathing exercises, and other things. And I tried transcendental meditation, and it really worked well for me. And I saw the research about it and my friends who also learned. And it helped me to go through a very difficult period where I was living in Beirut, Lebanon, where there was a huge civil war and conflict between different communities and really very difficult conditions. And many friends and family were hurt and there were dangers. And so I really wanted to understand why humans do what they do, what makes them, what's the motivation. And so I kept studying medicine and graduated, but also at the same time when I finished, I took a sabbatical, went to Switzerland, learned to become a teacher of Transcendental Meditation, and had learned a lot of its advanced techniques. And then was lucky to be accepted at MIT for a program in brain and cognitive science. So I thought if I researched the brain more and I participated in discovering how the brain works, how our nervous system works, I will be able to answer all my questions. While at the same time, I was practicing transcendental meditation. And I got accepted also at Harvard and the neurology department at Massachusetts General Hospital. So there again, it's a field of science and a field of medical study of the brain. I had done a little bit of psychiatry at the beginning. So trying to combine all that we know about mind, body, behavior to understand what is going on, what can we do. And ultimately, I found that the mind has such power and such ability to heal personally and to develop our potentialities. And after all, we live our lives through our consciousness, through our awareness. So I was called when I graduated from MIT with a PhD and completed my fellowship in neurology at Mass General at Harvard. I was invited by Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, the founder of this program, to meet him in India. And I had met him before, but on brief areas and here and there. But at that time, he really invited me to come and work with him, really. And so I thought I can take some time, maybe another sabbatical time of, just investigating that field. And I thought I'd be there for a few months, but then it got prolonged into a year or so. And then it became my lifetime, actually, my whole life commitment to the mind, the body, understanding consciousness, and why we are here and what we can do about it, and the meaning of freedom, determinism, good and bad, and all the questions that we ask in life. And so it was a journey that led me, actually, that one day that Maharishi asked me to lead his movement after he left. And so now I am leading the Transcendental Meditation movement worldwide.
Yes. And when was that? When did you take over?
He proclaimed me as the leader in 2000. So that's kind of 24 years ago. But he, stayed and structured my leadership and guided how the organization would go, and really trained me until he left in 2008, early 2008.
And where are you from? Are you from Lebanon or elsewhere?
Yes, originally I'm from Lebanon. I'm born in Lebanon, but I'm also a French citizen. And I travel a lot around the world. I spend a lot of time, as you can imagine, in the United States, 10 years or so of study and work. And I keep going there. We have a university in Iowa. I was, at some a visiting professor. I continue to oversee and discuss with all our centers and colleges and schools and universities and clinics to make sure everything is integrated and coordinated.
Now, tell me why you wrote this book, Consciousness is All There Is.
This is really after studying the mind-body relationship, which is a big problem in terms of science and philosophy. What is the physical part of our reality? What is the mental part of our reality? We have consciousness, which is non-physical. It's a very subjective experience. We have what we call the physical reality, which is made out of supposedly energy and matter. And this problem has been around for thousands of years, and it really has no full solution. There are theories about maybe we are both mind and body, and they are two different aspects of our reality. Maybe we are only energy and material values that actually get to be complex and transform into a nervous system that leads to an experience which is consciousness. But there is also the idealist perspective, because that would be the physicalist perspective, that says that actually consciousness is primary. And it's consciousness that actually leads to the experience and appearance and the reality of the physical world. And so I took that angle based on conviction, scientifically, experimentally, empirically, and philosophically, and logically, and common sense, and put all of this together in my mind based on what I learned from Maharishi Mahesh Yogi, the Transcendental Meditation program, my personal experience, and the research, and developed a sense of a paradigm that explains how consciousness actually appears as matter. Because if you say, okay, consciousness is primary, there is one thing that has never fully been explained, and that is, what about physicality? Is it real, or is it just an illusion?
Mm-hmm.
And if you say it's an illusion, it kind of try to resolve the problem by kind of hiding behind a solution that is not fully understandable or fully acceptable from a scientific perspective. And so there was this idea that there can be something that is non-physical, non-material, such as consciousness. And the gap is how this consciousness appears or is our physiology, our universe, which is also real. So the challenge has been to accept the realism of consciousness, which means consciousness is real, and we can't ignore that because it's so predominant in our life. We live our life through consciousness. Without consciousness, there is no experience, there is nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But also that matter, the physical ability of the physical reality is also real. So we have the realism of consciousness, we have the realism of matter and physical reality, yet we don't understand how they communicate together or whether they are an extension one of the other. And therefore, that was the main problem to be solved. And in my book, Consciousness is All There Is, I address that problem in great detail and find it that it's actually ultimately a solution to many, many aspects of life that are not resolved, about meaning of life, why we are here, etc. And so I wrote this book to contribute to the thinking, to the philosophy and science, trying to understand consciousness and matter and the other big questions about living and life and how we can make it better, how we can be happy. Do we have freedom, or are we living in an orderly but deterministic universe? And how can all these very existential, profound questions be asked and resolved in a coherent, integrated way? And so it's a contribution to thinking and planning, and I hope that readers will enjoy it and take benefit from it.
So let's talk about consciousness. You know, we use this word, and I almost feel like we need two different kinds of words, because we talk about our consciousness, my consciousness. I'm aware. I'm not asleep. I'm awake right now, and so I'm conscious. Or I've had anesthesia and I wake up, so I'm conscious. And then we talk about consciousness, a field of consciousness. So can you talk about that a bit and differentiate?
Yes, this is really important. It's a very important point and a starting point, because when people talk about consciousness, as you beautifully described, it could be even understood as human-like consciousness only. And this is where we have to open our understanding to a broader perspective of what consciousnness truly is. And that's why the definition of consciousness has to be made clear, so we are talking about the same thing. Even when we talk scientifically or philosophically, it's important that we talk about the same thing. And the way I propose that we can define consciousness or understand consciousness is actually a very broad way, which gives consciousness a spectrum from very minimal levels of consciousness to very high and advanced levels of consciousness. And so what is consciousness then? Consciousness in that paradigm is whatever senses, whatever experiences, whatever reacts to anything. That is a process in consciousness. And whatever understands, whatever plans, whatever thinks, whatever experiences is a process within consciousness. So there is in the paradigm the proposition, which in my heart and mind and intellect feel it's more than a proposition. I feel it's reality, but out of proper presentation, it's a proposition that there is a field. And Lynn, you have talked about fields a lot. I know you're a great expert in that. So there is a field, and for the listeners who are familiar with you, they would know, but maybe some others will want to explain what is a field. And we take usually an analogy, say it's an ocean. It's an ocean that is not made out of water, of course. It's an ocean of consciousness. It's an ocean that is not physical, that is not material. It's a field, like you have electromagnetic field, you have gravitational fields, you have weak forces, strong forces, whatever scientists discover as fields. Take the electromagnetic field, for example. It's a field in which there is vibration or fluctuation. And it's like the ocean. That's why we come back to the ocean, because a field also is something we have to imagine or try to explain. So take the ocean, an ocean that has waves in it. So the ocean has different levels of its reality. It has the surface level, which is waves, and it has, as you go deeper and deeper into that ocean, you have more and more quiet levels. So although it is non-physical, non-material, consciousness is a field which is not limited by time and space. So it's beyond time and space because it's not a physical entity. It's not material, physical, localizable entity. And it's permeating everything. It's everything. However, it has a quality within it. It has a nature. And its nature is consciousness, which means its nature is to be conscious. That is why we are calling it consciousness. So to be conscious means it reflects on itself. It is one field that knows itself. It is conscious of itself. And that is the broadest level of potential, level of consciousness, where the field knows itself, and it knows itself from all possible ways of knowing itself. So as it reflects on itself, it experiences itself from a broad perspective as the whole ocean, but it can see the dynamics of self-reflection, creating waves of reflection where you can see from a limited perspective or from a wide perspective. For this, we say, for the example, to have an idea of how it feels, is the waves in that ocean. You can go up to the surface and be on the wave and say, well, I want to focus on the wave and see only the wave. And therefore, you have now a limited perspective. You are focusing, which means attention is there. The attention goes on one wave, and there is one wave. But then you can say, I'd like to see what is next to the wave. And then you see another wave, and you see a third wave. Or if you have the ability, you can see a lot of waves. You can see, if you can expand your consciousness, you can see all the waves. And you can also dive deep within the ocean and see the entire ocean, and at the same time, see the entire range of possible dynamics within the ocean and all possible waves on the surface of the ocean. So
Go ahead.
These are the different perspectives of that ocean on itself, which can be a broad perspective or limited perspective.
And when we're talking about consciousness, we're talking about all of us being part of this one massive ocean, and that we're all tuning in to this one massive ocean instead of having individual consciousnesses.
Exactly. Our individual consciousness are actually the ocean of consciousness deciding or limiting its perspective on one wave or more waves. Or actually, you can limit your perspective on just some molecules in the, in the ocean. Some very limited, you don't even see the wave, you just see the molecule of water. That's why there is a range of experience of consciousness. So, for example, when two particles interact with each other, let's say an electron with a positron, a negative charge particle with a positive charge particle, they attract each other and they come together. This is actually a dynamic of consciousness. It's very limited, meager level of consciousness. So this is where, again, we have to remind ourselves not to project our human ability to have consciousness onto the particle or the tree or the animal. They are different, We have to accept that there are different ways of being conscious, different layers of consciousness. Even humans, we experience sleep, dreaming, waking. We experience during waking that we are sometimes drowsy, sometimes alert. We experience sometimes we see things in the future, we have revelation, we have creativity, and sometimes we are, particularly when we are under stress, we are narrow-minded, we are limited in our ability, limited in our perception. So yes, the answer is, it is the ocean, and the ocean is experiencing itself from different perspectives, and these perspectives are, among others, what we are, what you are, what the tree is, what the animal is, what the planet is. They all have their perspective, but they are all the play of that ocean looking at itself from different angles, different perspectives, some limited and some broad.
And I think it makes sense to also say that when we talk about consciousness, uh, it is not necessarily the brain. I mean, that is one of the other issues that is a problem, is with medical science, as you well know, it usually defines consciousness as the firings of this brain. And many scientists working in this are now talking about the brain as much more a receiver transmitter mechanism that is picking up this from this ocean of consciousness to have this individual experience you're discussing. Now, something I thought was really interesting about the book. First of all, I love that you quoted James Jeans, the British physicist, who said the universe is looking much more like one big thought rather than anything else, rather than a big sea of matter. One thing that was very interesting about what you talked about was this participation between observer and observed, and that you were saying essentially it is a three-way element to create reality. You've got the observer, you've got the observed thing, and you've got the creation of it, essentially. So this is really what we're talking about, I guess, is a big version of superposition. The idea from physicists, quantum physicists, that subatomic particles aren't an actual anything until observed or measured, at which point they collapse. They call it collapsing the wave. They collapse down from the potential of something to something real. Is that your view now of reality out there? That when
Absolutely.
I look at a tree, I'm creating it essentially.
Yes. For the moment I look at the tree becomes real for me. Now, does the tree exist without me? That's also a big question that Einstein and other Bohr and Planck and others have played with. Does the moon exist if I don't look at it? Well, it might exist because somebody else is looking at it, so it exists for that person, or because there is some interaction with it. And since we have broadened the understanding of consciousness, even if the sun is looking at it, so the sun or the other planets are interacting with it, then it collapses into the moon. So that's beyond really the limitation of what consciousness is, because we are broadening it. So any exchange or experience between two different elements is where an observer and an observed interact, and then the object becomes real for the person. So I define the term to exist or to be real as being an object of awareness for a certain observer. So when an observer comes into contact with an object, with something, with another observer, let's say, that other observer becomes for me an object in my awareness, and therefore it collapses. So for me, it is real. It becomes real for me. So existence and reality depend on the coming together of an observer, a process of observation, and an observed. And so, yes, it's exactly like that. And regarding the other point, which which is very important that you have raised, and which I talk about in the book, and we've been talking about it for a long time in terms of reality actually being experienced. So consciousness is like the ocean, the waves. And I usually take the analogy of a radio, for example, or a television station. So the radio is able to pick up the electromagnetic waves. And if you damage the radio, then it can't, sing for you or produce what these waves are there. But the radio is not itself the source of the waves. The radio is a transducer. It picks up something and then explains it, because that's one of the big arguments that scientists have that says, if you damage the brain, you don't have consciousness, therefore consciousness creates the brain. But it's like saying, if you damage the radio, then you don't have music, therefore it's the radio that actually creates the music. Whereas when you look deeper, you know that these electromagnetic waves are in the air and the radio is just picking them up. And if you damage it, obviously it will not pick them up, so you will not have the music anymore.
And that solves what tends to be called the hard question of consciousness, because the scientists always proceed from the idea that the brain is giving rise to this subjective experience and not something out there that the brain is picking up. Let's talk a bit about time, because you talk about a sort of sea of time, a kind of endless time. And I'm very interested in that because I've looked at what quantum physicists talk about, and any good quantum physicist, Carlo Rovelli wrote about this and many others. There's no such thing as time. There's no such thing as sequential time as we create it, as we know about it. What is your view of time?
Time is a necessity in the manifest universe to separate individual entities one from the other in a sequence. So I look at space and time as a conceptual aspects within consciousness, where the concept is to separate one entity from the other, either at the same time, so you have then space. So when you look at things at the same time, like let's say now we are having a moment, and in that moment, we are different individuals, therefore there must be separation between us, and that separation we call space. Now, if we look at things in the same configuration of space and then look at them changing, then when I change, when we talk, when there is a moment and there is another moment and there is another moment, that separates the moments of existence on a conceptual level, actually, and that's what we call time. So time is that which separates in the dynamic development of one moment into another, even within the same space. And so if everything is in the same space, then what can allow differentiation and change is time. If everything is at the same time, what allows differentiation is space. So that's why space and time are intimately connected. And in my presentation of the paradigm, both space and time are concepts in consciousness, because the reality is that ultimately everything is in the same space and time. Now, this is
So it's a mental construct.
exactly.
Okay. Okay. So I'm going to ask another question that you brought up in your book that I loved. What about karma? You know, I've always loved that line, karma never forgets an address. That is,
Yes.
that's a wonderfully, it's a wonderful line. What about karma in this situation?
Karma is simply based on action and reaction. And I explain in the book why there is that phenomenon, because, these are phenomena in physics that we know. You create something, you get an immediate reaction to it. And it's always like that. Why should it be like that? It's based also on the paradigm that you start with that flat field of wholeness, which is the absolute field of pure consciousness. And in terms of the physical reality, it is nothingness. So it is nothing physical. This is very important as a starting point. It is not a physical reality, so it is nothingness. So how can anything come from nothing? That's a big question also in physics. And the way the paradigm resolves that is that overall, because we are saying beyond time and space, overall, nothing always remains nothing. So let's our viewers and listeners be not alarmed. So overall, nothing always remains nothing. So how is it possible that we see something out of nothing? Because we see things. We are there, we are here, we're talking, we have the universe, it develops, it's a million things happening, trillion and more things are happening. The reason why is that within that nothing, you can actually create something if you create the opposite at the same time. So let's say you have a line and you make a wave in that line going up. If you make another wave going down, then you add them up and you get straight line. So for every wave that goes up, if you create a wave that goes down, which is exactly equal but in the opposite direction, you still have the line. Now, this is a simple basis for the fact that if you create a million waves that go up and then exactly similar million waves but that go down and you add them up, you'll get nothing. So if you add +1 and then you say, well, I take -1, you're still at 0. So in order to maintain its integrity, its wholeness, its fullness, its equanimity, and it's not a question of a purposeful decision making, it's an automatic reality where in order to be always the same and in order to have always nothing, you have to have every time an action be balanced by an equal and opposite reaction. And that is the basis of karma. So when you create a disturbance in the field of being, there is an exact automatic opposite action and reaction that happens, and that's what we call karma. Now, we see karma not happening automatically, although it's computed automatically. And that is because, again, of the conceptual elements of space and time. When you are acting within space and time, the reaction can appear to happen later than the time you are acting on it. And this doesn't mean it hasn't been computed and taken care of automatically and immediately. It's only your perception that makes you live the reaction at a different time or in a different space. So in order to understand fully karma, we have to understand action and reaction and why it is there. And we have to understand the limitations of space and time as constructs or concepts that allow us to live in the relative world. Because to live in the relative manifest world, we have to have separation. Otherwise, if everything is melted into each other, we only have one thing. And then you don't experience from a limited perspective. So we have to explain why do we have to experience from a limited perspective. And the book goes into why manifestation happens. So why things appear as manifest and different entities, whereas in reality, it's all the one ocean of consciousness.
And when we talk about manifest, we're not talking about the typical idea about manifestation. You know, I want, I get. You're talking about the manifest, the visible sticks and stones world, as opposed to the unmanifest or the implicate order, I guess, as David Bohm talked about it. What about variety? Well, let me first ask, what about intention? How does intention fit into this concept of consciousness? I I put out my respectful request to the universe, or me as a group, which is what I do a lot. We put out our respectful request to the universe to change something, to make something created. What do you think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. And so it's at which level one is putting one's request or one's intention. If
Mm.
it is happening on the surface level of the ocean, then you have less ability to carry your intention to its full uh, appreciation and full creation of the intention that is desired, of fulfillment of the intention. If you have the ability to think from the depths of the ocean, then you are acting on the master level on the switchboard that actually makes things happen. So that is why intentions have different abilities to get fulfilled, and that is based on which level you are thinking from. So we have the waves, they are on the surface, and we have the ocean. We can dive into the ocean. That's why I practice transcendental meditation and I teach it. It's because it really means to transcend, which means to go beyond the surface waves of the ocean and go to the actual ocean. So be the ocean, be that universe that you're talking about, and act from that level. So your intention then is becoming the intention of the universe, and it's very easy to achieve. Of course, this movie, The Secret, that how much intention and how much thoughts and how
Mhm.
much people achieve things by thought. What they missed in actually I guess, in this movie is to say that at which level you are thinking, at which level. So people got saying, okay, I'm going to think about something. But if you are stressed and thinking on a surface level and thinking in a way that is just agitated, like on the surface of the ocean, your intention might carry something, but it will be very limited. And so
Mhm.
what we need is to transcend, to go beyond the surface and be the ocean. And then you can have much more powerful waves and get the ocean to be deeper. You can create only very little ripples in a little glass, a little more ripples in a swimming pool, a little bigger waves in a lake, and the huge waves in the ocean because of the depths of the ocean. So if you are the ocean, then you can create what you like in a very powerful way.
Yes, and let's talk about those levels and achieving them. I mean, one of the things we do with my work is, and one way that it seems to allow people to dive to a deeper level is group effects, group intention, And with that, and the big secret sauce is both oneness and also altruism. And altruism seems to be a really key piece in the work I do. Talk us through the varieties of consciousness and getting to those higher levels. How do you do that?
What
So
you
you
mentioned,
talked about fourth level, you talked about God consciousness, you talked about unity consciousness. How do you achieve those? And what are they, and how do they differentiate from ordinary consciousness?
well, first, let me acknowledge your beautiful altruism and all these values, because this is how expansion of consciousness happens. When you are under stress or fear, we know even physiologically in the brain that the upper parts of the brain are shunted away, and the blood even goes to the defense mechanisms, the fight or flight response that we know, the amygdala, the limbic system, and the vision becomes quite narrow and kind of tunnel vision. So there you are protecting yourself and the enemy is there, either you run or not. And therefore your sense of self becomes very limited, more and more limited. And there, your ability to see in a broad perspective and to act from a broad perspective is very limited. I'll describe the higher states of consciousness, but would like to bring them back to how what you propose actually is beautiful and is helpful. See, the ultimate purpose of even life is to reach a point where you understand what reality is ultimately. And what reality is very simple. It's the ocean of consciousness. So that ocean of consciousness is experiencing itself from different small perspectives. But as one grows and evolves, the perspective enlarges to start encompassing more and more of its own reality. And that's what we call the expansion of the self. So my little self with a certain name, a certain characteristics, certain profession, and all of these are one aspect of reality, which is limited by understanding reality as having those characteristics that are me, and understanding others are being different. Now, the way we go through higher states of consciousness is to go beyond this limited perspective of the self directly by diving deep within ourselves. All this, what we call know thyself. And know thyself doesn't mean know your qualities and your limitations, but truly to know that you are the ocean of consciousness that we have been talking about. And transcendental meditation brings that ability to get the mind to dive within and start experiencing these layers and deeper layers of consciousness within, until one experiences what we call transcendental consciousness, which means consciousness which is beyond limitation and beyond specificity, where we go beyond. That's why it's called to transcend. To transcend means to go beyond. We go beyond all limitations and experience pure consciousness, which is the ocean of consciousness. So that ocean we're talking about is experienceable, and it's experienced within the self. So first state of consciousness, what we call higher states of consciousness, means higher than sleep, dreaming, and waking, is transcendental consciousness, which means that moment of experiencing awareness as pure being, pure consciousness, the pure self, which is the ocean. And here I am discovering that I am the ocean. That is the first stage. When I know I am the ocean and this experience gets stabilized in my daily activities, which means it's not only experienced during the time I close my eyes and I meditate, but when I come out, there is something remaining from that, some memory of that, or some direct experience of that. I am settled. I remain settled even though when I'm active. And when this is fully stabilized, this is what we call the fifth state of consciousness, which we have given it a name cosmic consciousness. This is Maharishi Mahesh Yogi who gave that name. Cosmic consciousness means even when you are active on the outside, you never lose the self. And in the ancient traditions, this is called liberation or moksha in Sanskrit, which means I am freed from the boundaries of the object taking over my awareness. I'm always knowing that I am the ocean, even while I am in the active world. So that is the first level of it. True expansion established even during activity. That is the fifth state of consciousness. The sixth state of consciousness is when you look at the object outside of you and you start seeing the wholeness within them. You start seeing the logic within them. And this grows with the growth of the heart, the growth of the feeling, the growth of the unifying value, where you start taking the objects as part of your reality and understanding the fullness of that reality. And that's what we call God consciousness. It doesn't mean you have the consciousness of God, but it means you actually appreciate the creation of God. And we take an example usually when you look at a painting and you truly appreciate all aspects of the painting and what has been done and how it's been done and how it's intended, you're really appreciating the painter. And that's why we are saying at that level of consciousness, you are on a level that you can appreciate the creation, and therefore you are on that level of God consciousness. And yet there is one higher even level. This was the sixth. The higher level is called unity consciousness. In unity consciousness is when you fully realize that everything is also the ocean. So first I realize I am the ocean, and I can see and I'm the ocean even when I'm in the activity and all doing things. Then I realize all of this activity is unified, is beautiful, that has a coherent, I can deal with it, I can feel close to it, I love it, I appreciate it, because with love, appreciation grows, and with greater appreciation, love grows, and so it feeds on itself. And then you make the step where you say, well, actually everything is myself. Everything is the ocean. I am the ocean, you are the ocean, everything is the ocean. And that is why we call it unity consciousness. That's the seventh state of consciousness. So, how this happens? First transcending, then acting, then the heart is fulfilled, and then unity consciousness grows in a sequential way. That is where I can come back to your techniques, which is beautiful. Altruism. What is altruism? Altruism is really taking the other as myself. That is also what love is, what supreme love is really embracing more of reality. And actually, even while we are embracing the other, we are the ones who grow most, because we are the ones who are seeing unity. That is altruism. And therefore, these even aspects create greater unity. And as they create greater unity, they are more in the true direction of the meaning of life and the reason why we are here, and fulfilling that meaning, because it's bringing us to the understanding that we are all that ocean of consciousness after all. And not only understanding it intellectually, but actually living it directly and knowing it and experiencing it. So that is the way we can see how the expansion of consciousness happens, either directly through transcending or through activities that are sometimes devotional, sometimes actions that are good. So in the ancient traditions, they have what they call karma yoga. Karma means action, and so good action. Or Gyan yoga, through knowledge. That's what we are doing now, getting to understand, and understanding helps. And there is the bhakti yoga, which is the devotional part, which is love and care and embracing others. And all of these expand the field of consciousness.
tell me a little bit before we wind up this amazing talk about some of the mass meditations that you have done, because your organization has done, because I have to say, they were one very good inspiration for me way back in 2007 when I decided to start the intention experiment. I had wondered, could we lower violence in a war-torn area by lots of people intending together? And I looked to and actually even talked to people in the Transcendental Meditation organization, some of the people doing studies, to find out how long you meditated for, et cetera. And while ours was different with a different technique and it was more intentional rather than a critical mass of meditators, it certainly, as I say, was great inspiration. So tell us a bit about some of the studies that you've done most recently to try to lower violence in areas that need it.
There are 116 actually scientific studies that have been done on this subject, and they started in the 1970s when Maharishi felt that when a small percentage of people will practice this technique, because we are all that ocean and connected, there is something that is called collective consciousness. So collective consciousness, you can say, is the average sum total of the consciousness of all the individuals in society. And that creates a kind of feeling, a kind of mood, a kind of atmosphere, a kind of level of clarity and the collective awareness. So if a society is stressed, if individuals are stressed in a society, then we say the society is stressed. And those who are having some weak tendencies or difficulties, they are tending to do crime and to behave in ways, maybe get accidents, maybe eat the wrong things, do the wrong things, and make mistakes and all of that, because there is that stress in society. If you calm down the collective consciousness through a small number of people already cooling down, if you like, the heat and the division or the conflicts or whatever, then even those who are not meditating themselves, they will be able to experience greater clarity and make better decisions. So on the basis of this, in the 70s, Maharishi predicted that a small percentage, and it turned out to be 1%, because when we went around and saw what cities had 1% of people practicing transcendental meditation, it turned out that those cities had decrease in crime and decrease in conflicts, and this was reported. And then there was a program that was introduced later in the 70s, which was called, in the mid-70s or so, the Siddhi program, which means how to think from that feeling, from that level of the depths of the ocean. So one thing is to transcend, to go deep, and that calms down the collectivity. And the other thing is to able to go deep down within and actually think from that level. It's, close to intention, but there is a process, and there are techniques that we use to practice how to think from that level. And there we have found that the square root of 1% is enough to create this effect. And so we tried it 40 years ago. We had the square root of 1% for the whole world population. We assembled in Iowa. We have a university there, Maharishi International University. And people came from all over the world. And the scientists studied the changes, and they found really reduction in conflicts. It was 1983, 1984, in the Middle East and different places, reduction in crime, countries coming more together. There is reduction in so many parameters. And so this inspired many people. And, people who supported that, I can mention a person who's Howard Settle, for example, who was a very able business person who supported a large group in the United States which reached the critical number of the square root of 1% of the population, which for the United States is less than 2,000 people. So that's not much, but they have to be practicing this program together morning and evening. And then over many, many years, we studied the results and the effects based on how many people are practicing this program together in Fairfield, Iowa, and the changes in society. And the results are absolutely amazing. They are so correlated. It's exact science. It's really perfect that shows reduction in many, many aspects, things that are totally unrelated, and that they fluctuate based on the number of people that actually transcend and practices advanced techniques together. So there was a reduction in crime, reduction in accidents of the road, reduction in infant mortality, reduction in rape and violent crimes and thefts, and many, many other aspects showing positive trends and reduction in those aspects. And this was over 15 years of looking at the shapes and the numbers. So it's really very accurate. One big study was done in Washington, D.C., where we proactively mentioned to the scientists, we're going to do this experiment, and we're going to do it in the summer. And, we're going to compare it to other people. And many people came, from the world. I was there also. And we practiced this program together. And there was 25% decrease in crime. And they compared it to control groups, what was there before the year before, and all of that. And scientists have said that it would take a storm of unexpected proportions and snow to reduce crime that much. There is nothing that can be explained. And it also resolves many problems on the political level, people coming together, etc. So the details are there, and it has been published in the Journal of Conflict Resolution. And those who published it, they said, we don't really understand fully the mechanism, but the science is so accurate that we cannot not publish it. And so this is really a real phenomenon. And that's why recently we have called for 10,000 group, because that will be the whole world population. And we did it in India recently in 23, 24, December, January at the beginning, but it was very, very short. And our intention, as you like to say, was that actually the group becomes permanent. Mm-hmm. And not our group, but there is some group that's permanent. And the result of that was amazing, because right now, there are several 10,000 groups in India that are being created that practice transcendental meditation and these advanced techniques. We are not there yet, but we have commitments from great spiritual leaders and support from, indirectly, of course, from government and officials. And therefore, we hope and we expect, if we want to end on the best note, considering what's happening in the world today, we hope that in the coming year, these groups will be established and solid, and that we will see big differences in the world, and the future, in my perspective, is bright.
That is such a wonderful place to end this podcast too. And I think this is the interesting part about it and the new science. And the new science is really the science of transcendental meditation is bringing science to ancient practices. But we have to get to the point of understanding that we are, as Einstein famously said, we cannot solve a problem but from the same mindset that created it. And so we need to look at things another way and start understanding that science and spirituality have come together, and they are offering solutions that people and politicians can't find elsewhere. So thank you very much, Dr. Tony Nader. Everybody should read his book, Consciousness is All There Is. It's at your local bookshop. It's at Amazon. It's published by Hay House. Make sure to get hold of a copy. and make sure to look further into meditation. I was telling Dr. Nader that I took my first course in TM in 1970 when I was a teenager, when the Maharishi came to town, so at my university. So it's been a fascination for many years. And I think altered consciousness, the idea of group intention, group meditation, all of these things can transcend the issues that we face now. And that's why it's so important for all of us to come together. Thank you so much, Dr. Nader. I hope to
Thank you.
carry on this conversation again.
I look forward. Thank you, Lynn. Your work has been phenomenal. It's a joy to be with you and to be on that path together.
Great. Thank you.